really want to win the International Speech Contest. I know that if you get to the speech contest, we have to fold purposely in front of you. But other than that, Scott Brown, who will be leaving us in 2 weeks, how to win. Thank you.
So I have to say, it is a bit ironic that I'm talking about how to win the international speech competition when I've never won the district speech competition or a division competition in Orlando. I made it to the finals in District 47, but I've never made it to the finals here. That doesn't mean that I haven't had a good speech or a speech good enough to get there. It just means I haven't won. And I think there are a lot of people that are in that same boat. Really good speeches, just for whatever reason on that day, a panel of your peers thought somebody else was better. And that's okay. My name is Scott Brown, and I have made it a habit over the past few years to come in second or third place in every district contest that we hold. I have come in second 3 times in table topics, 2 times in evaluation, I came in 3rd in international, and I won evaluation last year. So I've been on that district stage frequently, and I've noticed some things over the course of my time in Toastmasters. And hopefully I can share with you some ideas of some things I've noticed, not just through my journey, but also through spending 6 years really studying all of the international winners to try to craft a speech that can get us to finally get a District 84 International Speech Champion. Or someone that will come in second after next year's Division 11 International Speech Champion, which will be me. I don't know if that's going to be a thing. But I have to start with this. Nobody who has ever won the international speech competition has done it by themselves. You listen to every story of every person that's gotten there, and they all have this cavalcade of people that surrounded them and worked with them to take them from where they started, sometimes as a bad stand-up comic, to finally winning an international speech competition. Nobody does it alone. Does that mean that all of you are going to have the opportunity someday to win the international competition? Probably not. But it does mean that all of you do have the opportunity to work with someone to win the international speech competition. And maybe somebody else is the one who wins it, but it doesn't mean that you weren't the reason why they won it. And that could be just as valuable and just as important. And I know that from experience. Because last year when I won the evaluation competition, it was a fulfillment of a promise. Not a promise that I would someday win a district title, but a fulfillment of a promise that Jeremy and I made to each other 6 years ago when I first started in Toastmasters. 6 years ago, Jeremy and I recruited me the very first year that I was a Toastmaster and said, you have to go and enter the evaluation contest. This was in August, and I joined in May, and I said, great, what's that? Had no idea what I was doing. But I ended up making it to the finals. I came in 3rd that very first year. Had no idea how that happened or what had happened there. And after we were leaving the conference, after I came in 3rd, Jeremy said, wouldn't it be cool, now that we've had one person here, what if we had 2 people from our club at the same contest go 1st and 2nd someday? And I naively turned to him and said, sure, that'd be awesome. Not realizing that there are rules, you really can't have 2 people from the same club make it to district. But if you know my path, you know that I have joined a lot of different clubs in a lot of different places. And I ended up going through Division E to get to the finals, and he went through Division D. And the day of the finals was one of the most, I'd say one of the most important days of my Toastmasters journey. Because as we sat there at dinner, I could tell Jeremy was nervous. It was the first time that he was in the finals for evaluation. It was my 3rd time that I'd been in the finals for evaluation. And I could just tell from his body language and knowing him well enough that I could just sense the tension in him. And when they cleared the tables and we started to get ready and they announced 5 minutes till we start, he went over, sat at a table by himself and was ready to go. I said, no, come here. I picked up a chair and set it in the aisle. Pulled another chair over and sat beside him. Went and found a clipboard and gave it to him to write on. And sat beside him. So it was me and Jeremy watching a speech, just like we would do if we were sitting on a Thursday morning having breakfast at Articulators. And we took our notes, we didn't talk about it, we went back to the room, and we spent 5 minutes making our notes there and handed everything in. And I made sure that I prepared him for that moment. Take off your lanyard, relax, take a breath. But he was standing against the far wall. And have you ever seen somebody that looks like they just drank a gallon of coffee? He was standing against the wall, and the only way I can describe it is he thought that the wall somehow was going to help him win if he could knock it down. He was bouncing up and down and bouncing against the wall. And I'm sitting at a table over here and I said, Jeremy, stop! Stop! Today is no different than every Thursday morning. The only difference is we had better food this time. And he laughed just like that. And I saw this breath. And he sat down. And the moment they called his name for second place, I felt like I had won. Not because I knew that probably was going to win, but because I had helped Jeremy get to the place that we had said we wanted to go together. We had driven up to the contest together. We had gone through everything together for 6 years. And to be able to watch him with this greatest smile radiating across his face, knowing that he won as far as he thought he could go, that was the greatest feeling that I ever had. And I have to say that in the moment that they called my name that I had won, as happy as I was, it was anticlimactic because I was happier that Jeremy was there and we had come in first and second. Because we had invested in each other to go someplace and do something that neither of us knew how to do or knew if we could accomplish. That's what it takes to win the International Speech Contest. You need someone to invest in you. You need to invest in somebody else. Because the greatest way you learn is through teaching. And if it wasn't for my opportunity to be able to help Jeremy get better, I wouldn't have gotten better. And he always says that the reason he got better is from watching me get better. It's a symbiotic relationship. This is not a path that we walk alone. Every winner has a cavalcade of people behind them that walked beside them and with them. And every winner has a story that you can learn from in a microcosm of what they did to learn what they did to get there and how they did something different. Because every speech is different. This is Mark Brown. Mark Brown had a fantastic speech, a second chance, in which he actually sang part of his speech because he sang the lyrics from Beauty and the Beast. And I learned I cannot sing. That is a bad speech for me to try to emulate. I can never sing. I'm not Les. People pay me to stop singing. So I moved on and I thought, well, maybe the next year, 1996, that one will be a good one. And David Nottage is the only winner from New Zealand. And he had an amazing story about learning to ride a bike called Get Up. And it was hysterical. And I learned humor. And I learned very quickly that a speech that you tell about trying to get up can evolve a few years later into somebody needing to get up. If you watch David Nottage's speech and then you watch Darren LaCroix's speech, there are a lot of similarities between those two speeches. You can take an idea that someone else has published, has put forth, and let it evolve within your own context to become something better. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can make a better wheel. And you can deliver it in a way that nobody would ever expect. No one expected Darren LaCroix to fall flat on his face, literally, and then win. But he did something different. And then a couple years after that, Lance Miller showed that you don't need to necessarily be a stand-up comic. You can just be incredibly earnest in your delivery and your approach and come up with something that everyone walks away with. He had an amazing speech called The Ultimate Question, in which he talked about validation. How often do we validate people? But he used the image of a stamp that you get to validate your parking. You know that sound they make? And he used that sound repeatedly through his speech, so you remembered. You walked away thinking, am I in anybody else? He had a great hook that was simple and complex at the same time. And then Ryan Avery showed us that theater matters. He won here in Orlando by crawling around the stage collecting cigarette butts when he was in high school. Theater matters. And he showed that sometimes the best speeches are like one-person shows. And I realized I was never in theater. And I needed to do something different than that. Anybody remember Changed by a Tire and the voices that Presyon Vasiliev was able to choose? He's from Chicago, originally from Romania, and he had this vocal variety that he was able to emulate the sounds of a car jack, raising a car and then having it fall off the jack. And it was mesmerizing. And he's the only one that did this with no intention of ever going anywhere else with the speech, but just using it for what it was that day. He's never gone on to go become a famous public speaker. That's just what he wanted to do, was to win the contest. But sometimes it can be a spark. And sometimes you do something incredibly different and you lie at the beginning of a speech in a way that encompasses everybody else. Words show that words matter, but how you deliver those words is incredibly important. And having a simple prop that can illuminate a point that you're making can change the narrative. And sometimes you need to have the most amazing gesture by pulling on a pair of underwear over your pants and wearing them for an entire speech. If you've never seen Darren Tay's speech, it's fascinating how he was able to come up with stories about being bullied and using that as a pair of underwear to be able to show what it's like to live your life remembering a moment that you wanted to forget. And then one of my favorite speeches of all time, a simple rose. You can peel off the petals and throw in a trash can to show you're broken. And then at the end, pull out a full rose to show how you've been healed. Something that simple. But again, a great prop to be able to demonstrate a point in its simplicity that doesn't need to be overly complicated, but is just so powerful to be able to engage your audience. And then Jim Key came in third the year that Darren LaCroix won and almost walked away completely. But Darren LaCroix convinced him to come back and do it again. And he came back and did Never Too Late and showed that even though you get someplace and you come so close, don't give up, because maybe that wasn't the right message at the right time to the right audience. And when he won walking away because it was a phenomenal presentation. Sometimes you don't have to even write a new speech. You don't even have to write a new speech. We Can Fix It was delivered twice. He came in third with it, and then 2 years later he won with almost the exact same speech. Don't reinvent the wheel. Reinvent how you shape the wheel. Reinvent how you deliver the wheel. And make it personal and yours. And then lastly, the word that we have always heard is never be the hero of your own story. How many of you have heard that advice? Don't be the hero of your own story. Ramona Smith was the hero of her own story, and she won. Because the story she shared was simple, and something that related to all of us. And this past year, she broke that notion that you can be the hero of your story if your story is relatable to everybody else. So all of these micro lessons, when you look at them individually, seem incredibly disparate, and you can't figure out what to learn from those things. But when you back up a step and you look at them from a macro level, you learn that there are some specific things that all of them do incredibly well that we can learn from in our quest, not just to win an international competition, but to win the club contest, to win the area contest, and to win the division contest before we ever get to district. The first one, and probably the most important, is why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want the glory of standing up and saying, I've beaten 30,000 other speakers and I am the greatest speaker in the land today? Because if that's why you're doing this, you're bound to fail. But if your why is because you want to get a message that you want to share with the world, beyond your club, your area, your division, your district, but because you know that you have something to share, that why will resonate. But you have to know what is your why. We all have a different why. When you think about why we are Toastmasters, my why is different than Michelle's and Renee's, and Les's, and Dean's. We're all different. Find your why and be clear on that. Because if your why is just to win a trophy, as Darren LaCroix says, just go buy a trophy. It's easier and cheaper. Know your why. And once you know your why, the one thing that every one of these speakers shares, they all spoke outside of Toastmasters in some large capacity before ever getting to the international stage. What was Darren LaCroix before he was a Toastmaster champion?
Stand-up comic.
Stand-up comic. What does Ramona Smith do by her day job? High school teacher. I think she speaks to people on a regular basis. Jim Key, what does he do? Pastor. Thinks he speaks to people on a regular basis. Lance Miller and Ryan Avery, what do? Theater. Think they're in front of crowds on a regular basis. They're all different places to be, but the comfort level of standing here is honed by the comfort level of standing somewhere out there. So I've been saying for years that none of us join Toastmasters to be a better Toastmaster. We join Toastmasters to be better at something out there. Apply what you learn here there, so you can learn there what you need to apply here. It's a cycle. It's a circle. And if you figure out how to apply there to learn here, then you have an opportunity to get really good at something that you didn't know you could do before. What are the themes that everybody has within the International Speech Contest? Are there any purely humorous speeches that are just a story that win the international contest? Are there any really sad stories that really just tug at your heartstring but never take you anyplace that win the international contest? Or are they all a roller coaster that inspire you to do something that you know you need to do, that you know you're struggling to do, and that you know you want to do? They're inspirational, they're motivational, and they're impactful. Those themes that you've heard throughout all these international speeches, are any of them revolutionary that you walked away saying, I never knew that I should get up if somebody knocks me down. I never knew that failure wasn't the last option. I wish somebody had told me that I could be changed if I paid attention to the things around me. How many of you know those things already today? How many of you have stories that you tell to your family and friends that are related to those types of things to help them get past where they are right now? Those are the themes to be able to craft into an international speech. But you have to be able to take them from where you were, show your struggle and your obstacle, have a villain, because every international speech has some sort of villain that you have to defeat, and then to show your success at the end. If you don't take them on that path of introduction of where you were, the journey, the villain, the fight, and the win, if you don't take them on that path, you're going to fall short. Because at some point, someone's wanting to know, what did you overcome, who stood in your way, and what was the outcome? How many speeches have you heard at the end you just went, and then what happened? Don't leave them hanging for any of that. When David Nottage gave an interview a few years after he won, they said, well, what do you need to teach people to be able to win? It's very simple. Make them fly, make them cry, and make them try. Make them fly, make them cry, make them try. That's how we formulate our own speeches, our own presentations to our friends and family and colleagues in real life. We forget to do that sometimes when it comes to contests. Anybody ever win with a story that wasn't their own? How can you be authentic if you're telling somebody else's tale? Now, after you're around people for a while, don't you get to know their stories a little bit? We all know each other's histories a little bit from being around each other. Do you think those of us that are in ACE and in Articulators together and in Weekend Toastmasters together, that we haven't found connection and we haven't heard people's stories on a regular basis? Yes. But we also don't tell them as our own stories because they're not authentically ours. Every story that's ever won has been authentically that person's journey, not somebody else's journey that they're trying to say is theirs. Because when you have to pretend to be somebody else, you can never be yourself. And every one of those people won because they were authentically themselves. Mark Brown sang because Mark Brown can sing. He has a world-class voice and a world-class message that he learned himself. Darren LaCroix won because he was knocked down and fell down and was down too long. And that was his journey. They didn't try to tell somebody else's story. But how easy is it for us to decide it's easier to tell somebody else's story because we know how it comes out. Tell your own story no matter how messy and complicated it is. And if it's not done yet, finish your story before you tell it. Because they want to know how it comes out. And you should be able to tell them. This is Michael Jr., stand-up comic who did one of the most amazing TED Talks I've ever heard. What can you give? I heard him say during a TED Talk that he gave at the University of Nevada that he was a stand-up comic and he was going on stage one night and in the back of his mind everything changed. He realized that his job was not to stand up on stage and make people laugh, to get laughs from people. But his job was to stand up on stage and give people the opportunity to laugh. That his job was to give people in situations that don't normally have the opportunity to laugh, the chance to laugh. And he started taking the opportunity to laugh into places that are generally not laughable places, like prisons and hospitals and orphanages. And he shared with those people stories that gave them the opportunity to be human and to laugh. The greatest gift we can ever give isn't something tangible. It's our investment in others. When you stand up in front of an audience, whether it's in an international speech competition or a club level or just in front of a group of your friends, they're investing their time in you. Every one of the winners took that to heart. They wanted you to have the time of your life because they were investing their message in you because they wanted you to grow. It wasn't about them looking good. It was about making other people feel good. Because do you remember everything somebody said? Remember everything somebody did? Or do you remember how people made you feel? Maya Angelou told us that 30 years ago, and it rings true today. If you're going to win any contest, you have to walk away not with having said the perfect words, but with leaving people with the perfect feeling. Why people lose is because they didn't give the great speech, but their speech didn't resonate with that crowd. Figure out what speech resonates. And then in every speech, also know that time is not linear. Have you ever seen speeches that start, this happened, and then this happened, and then finally this happened? And you just follow this very succinct timeline through a journey. But when you're telling a story, don't you say, this happened, and then, man, this other thing happened, but remember, back here, this other thing that I forgot to tell you about happened. And you go back and forth, right? As you take people through a journey, you don't have to take them very sequentially through time. Look at Darren LaCroix's speech. He doesn't talk about, I went to college, I graduated, I bought a Subway shop, I failed, I became a comic, I failed. He takes us through the stories, but in a non-sequential way to keep us more interested. Mark Brown does the same thing. Lance Miller does the same thing. Don't get so stuck within a timeline and within anchoring your speech in space that you get stuck with, it happened, it happened, it happened. Anchor your speech, but anchor it in a way that doesn't tie you to specific linear time places, but instead anchors it in the stories you tell, not in the timing in which you told them. And lastly, take us with you. Every great speech takes us from some place that was a struggle to some place that's a success. Allow us to walk with you. Don't tell us about it. let us walk beside you. Let us walk beside you. Think about the best speeches you've ever heard. They all have a sense of empathy where they want to walk beside the person struggling to help somebody along. And there's always a hero in their story, and rarely is it themselves that helped them in those times of need, that helped walk beside them and guide them along the way. Those are the greatest stories you can tell. Tell the stories of how you helped and how you were helped by someone. You're only going to get there with a little help from your friends. These are some of my friends who over the past 6 years have followed me to every contest I've been in, have been there to celebrate with me when I've won and console me when I've lost. And on your way to becoming an international champion, you're going to lose way more contests than you win. Lance Miller says he lost over 90 contests on his way to becoming the international champion. That's a lot. And stuff's going to happen, and on your journey, you're going to be so frustrated and angry, and you just want to scream out at the world, why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did I have to listen to somebody give my speech before I spoke? Stuff's going to happen. If your friends are beside you and you're invested in others, you're all going along the journey together. It's not a one-person journey. It's a team. It's a family. And as a district and a division, we do a pretty good job of that, don't we? This is the time we all need to rally around to be able to help somebody become that next champion. Now, this is my swan song, because I leave in 2.5 weeks. Someday, I know I will get to the international stage. And when I do, rest assured that I'm not going there just as a representative of whatever district I happen to live in at the time. I will always be a District 84 Toastmaster. I will always be an articulator. I will always be an acer. I will always be your friend. Along the way, you've helped me, and I hope that I've helped you. And if you've learned anything else from me over those past 6 years, learn this one thing. It's not about what we get, but it's about what we give. Give yourself so that someday somebody else can experience the thing that they cherish most. The silver trophy that doesn't hold beer.